I'm going to ask Liam Byrne MP to kick off.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that statement, Prime Minister. I know you're chairing COBRA on the war in Iran later this afternoon. Things are moving very quickly and the fog of war remains thick. But what is your central planning scenario for how this conflict ends? And what's your view about the timeframes?
Well, my very strong view is we need to de-escalate and bring an end to this conflict as swiftly as possible. And we've been working with a number of countries in that regard. And to that end, I welcome the talks reported between the US and Iran. And to be clear with the committee, we, the UK, were aware that was happening. And the immediate priority has to be a swift resolution of the conflict and delivering a negotiated agreement which puts tough conditions on Iran, particularly in relation to nuclear weapons. So that's the sort of number one priority. Obviously, there's no certainty in this, and that's why, in addition to the usual issues at COBRA meetings, which are often military, diplomatic, consular, we're holding a COBRA this afternoon on the economic impact, because my strong sense is that most people are very anxious and concerned at what they see on their television screens in terms of the conflict and the fear of escalation. But they're also very concerned about the impact it might have on them and their families, and that's what we will be absolutely focusing on this afternoon.
I mean, President Trump is obviously talking about days and weeks for this conflict to end. The markets are obviously pricing now for a disruption that lasts for some months. I know you've got to be very careful about not triggering panic buying of anything, but I mean, do you think that households and businesses in our country should be planning for a disruption that actually lasts for months, or do you think that actually this can be concluded in days and weeks, as President Trump seems to suggest?
Hard to answer that question, if I'm honest about it. I think all of our focus and energy has to be in the swift de-escalation, but we've got to plan on the basis that it could go on for some time, and that's the way in which we'll plan this afternoon. And since the conflict started, I've been really clear with the team that we mustn't fall in to the sort of false comfort of thinking that there will necessarily be a quick and early end to this. We have to plan on the basis there may not be. In terms of energy has been where a huge amount of focus has been. On energy supplies, I can reassure the committee that we haven't any meaningful concerns about energy supplies. Obviously, the price fluctuates daily. For household energy bills, it is important for me to reiterate that they will be cut because of the measures we took in the budget last year and then held until the end of June. And I know that for many members of the public, the question they've been asking is, does that still hold even if the conflict goes on? And the answer to that question is yes. So there's comfort there for households. Obviously, fuel duty is held until September. We've been working intensively in the last week or two with fuel suppliers, particularly petrol retailers, to make sure that nobody is profiteering from this, and that's why we've said to the CMA they've got to be all over any price gouging, any attempts to make money. And we've taken measures in relation to households that use oil for their heating, which is predominantly rural communities and quite extensively in places like Northern Ireland, where 68% heat their households by oil. They're the immediate measures. This afternoon we will be looking at a wider set of measures for the economy and specific sectors within the economy, and the Chancellor will then make a statement to the House tomorrow. So we'll have COBRA later on, which I will chair, and then the Chancellor will come to Parliament tomorrow to announce the outcome of the COBRA meeting so that there can then be questions in Parliament in relation to that.
Thank you. Bill Esserton MP.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that explanation, Prime Minister. LNG production in the region has been severely damaged already. Reports are that it will take 5 years to restore that level of production. This is going to have a profound effect on supply and on prices beyond the end of June, unfortunately. How are you factoring in those calculations to what support will be needed both by consumers and by industry?
Well, we're looking at what support can be put in. Obviously, that's subject to further discussion, not least at the COBRA this afternoon. It's a little bit early to be too concrete, if I'm honest, because we don't know yet how much longer this is going to go on. We know with households what's been held. We know that with energy-intensive businesses, there's already some support in, but I think a lot of businesses would be saying, well, even if we don't fall within the energy-intensive bracket, is there anything that can be done for us? I haven't got a concrete answer that I can put before you today, but I can assure you that we're looking across the board at what can be done, whether it's cost of living or the support that we need to put in. I want to make sure we've examined all the appropriate levers that we can pull.
Thank you. And we'll come to more of that in a moment. But I do want to, I think with everything going on in the world, it's important we discuss defence. And Tan Singh Desi, MP, is going to...
Thank you very much, Chair. Prime Minister, we were seeing reports of the US significantly ramping up its military presence around Iran in preparation for an attack, just as they did with Venezuela. But when they started the war, it was embarrassing that we couldn't even muster one single naval asset around the region. Are you embarrassed?
But no, I don't think that's actually right. During January and February, we obviously could see the build-up. We are working very closely with the US on intelligence, and therefore we pre-deployed quite a lot of assets to the region. Just to reassure you, radar systems were pre-deployed, counter-drone systems were redeployed, F-35 jets were deployed in greater number than were already there, ground-based air defence was deployed, 400 extra UK personnel were deployed, and autonomous mine hunting systems were deployed.
Yeah.
So far as HMS Dragon is concerned, it normally takes 6 weeks for the loading onto and deployment of the relevant capability onto the Dragon. That was done within 6 days with 22-hour working days, both with our service personnel and civilian personnel working together. But there was a lot of pre-deployment.
I'm aware of that, but with all due respect, that's one naval asset. And I think if we look at the wider scene, more than £500 million worth of submarine maintenance has had to be postponed because of the lack of a dry dock facility. Doesn't that failure to quickly deploy a Royal Navy asset simply demonstrate yet again how under-resourced and overstretched our armed forces are?
Well, the spending under the last government wasn't adequate, and Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary, concluded that the armed forces were hollowed out. But firstly, let me pay tribute to the work that they do, and let me assure the committee they have been working from about an hour or two after this conflict started with pilots in the air across the region, and they've been working continually, hundreds of hours since then. So I don't want anything I say to detract from the work, courageous work that they've been doing.
And let me talk about the IAMD, so the Integrated Air and Missile Defence Systems, or the lack thereof. We saw Iran launch a plethora of missiles and drones, including thousands of miles away towards the UK-US military base in Diego Garcia. If Iran or another adversary, such as Russia, were to launch ballistic missiles towards the UK, how would we defend ourselves?
Well, as you will appreciate, we keep this under constant review, and I can assure the committee of the assessments that we carry out on a constant basis. The 2 missiles didn't reach Diego Garcia, but we're continually monitoring this. On the question of integrated air defence systems, this is hugely important. And just in relation to our Gulf partners, to update the committee, we've embedded the UK airspace battle management specialists into military commands in the region. We're working with industry to distribute air defence missiles to Gulf partners. We're deploying short-range air defence systems to Bahrain at speed. This was an issue that came up as a matter of some urgency over the course of this weekend. And we're doing the same with Kuwait and Saudi Arabia.
It's good what we're doing with allies, but I think the British public will rightly be concerned about our own safety, because forget a Golden Dome or a Platinum Dome or any other dome, we have not made any such investments in our own defence. And would you not agree that the public will be concerned about the ability of Russia or another adversary to launch ballistic missiles, and we have no way of defending ourselves?
Yeah, and look, we constantly assess this, and we do have very effective ways of defending ourselves, and I don't want to raise levels of public anxiety. They're anxious about what they're already seeing on their television screens. They're anxious about the impact it will have on them, particularly economically, in their households. And I don't want to raise their levels of anxiety. I can tell you our military personnel, our security and intelligence services are working literally 24/7 to keep us safe and doing a very good job
we all
in
pay
that
tribute
regard.
to their bravery. Prime Minister, when finally is the fabled defence investment plan going to be published? Have you got a date for us?
Well, we're working hard to finalise it. I know from the work your committee does, you'll be aware this has been the first zero-based review that has ever been undertaken, so it's a huge amount of work. We're finalising it. We've absolutely got to get it right, and I want to ensure that anything relevant from this conflict is included within it, but we're finalising it. I can't give you a date, but I can tell you we're finalising it.
Okay, let me finally go on to defence spending then, if I may. I was at the Munich Security Conference last month when you intimated that you recognise the level of threats that we face and the urgency to build up our hard power, because that is, as in your words, the currency of the day. But there's a huge difference between rhetoric and reality. So will you chart out a path to reaching 3% of GDP spend on defence in this Parliament in order that we can get to the 3.5% agreed NATO target by the end of next Parliament, as in by 2035? Is that something that you can commit
Yes,
to?
so obviously we've already committed to 2.5% in 2027, and we'll hit that. That means that in this Parliament we'll spend £270 billion more than we would otherwise have done on defence. We have made that commitment to 3% in the next Parliament and to 5% by 2035, which is made up in the way that was agreed at the NATO summit.
That means
What I
everything's
said
going to be backloaded.
what I said at the Munich conference is that clearly we're going to have to go further and faster, and obviously I'll set out what I mean by that in due course.
One of the things you can do, Prime Minister, is to give indication of future orders, even if they're not that funded at this point. Is that something that you're considering?
Yeah, can I just address that both in relation to the DIP process and any defence spending?
DIP, Defence Investment Plan.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Nothing we're doing now in considering the DIP is interfering with ongoing orders, and you'll have seen the Leonardo order go through 2 or 3 weekends ago, which was a very important order.
Patricia Ferguson, partly on this issue.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Prime Minister. Last week we heard reports that Type 83 frigate programme could be delayed to plug gaps in the defence budget. Do you recognise that such delays could hamper momentum which has been building in the shipbuilding industry in recent years?
Yeah, I don't want delays, and that's why I'm insisting that there shouldn't be any delays in the order. It's really important that those orders continue in the way that is expected. Shipbuilding is obviously hugely important in Scotland. I was very pleased that we got the Norway frigate deal just a few months ago, which will provide at least a decade's worth of work in Scotland. It also ensures that there's interoperability between our frigates and Norway frigates, which is increasingly an important part of the strategic work that we're doing. But I went to Clydeville, as you know, to see the workforce there, to thank them, and also to allow them to see that for them and the next generation there's more work in the shipyards for them.